Join us on the program, the Austin Gun Rights Examiner, our unofficial investigative analyst here at NRA News, Mr. Howard Nemerov. Howard, good evening, sir.
Hey, good evening, Cam. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for coming on the program tonight.
Well, thanks for having me on.
We've been talking about the nanny state here for the last segment or so, and I guess the United Nations, in its own way, is sort of the global nanny state. And as you write, as the UN advances its plan for international control of civilian firearms ownership, it's reasonable to investigate exactly who the UN represents and what to expect from UN implemented policies. And so you've got a two-part article here on some of the examples of a UN disarmament. Where did you get started?
Well, this one, I'm actually, this is a warm-up act. I'm going to be addressing the United Nations more in the near future. But where I got started here was we got this new United Nations special rapporteur on housing, and she's convinced that we need to regulate the housing market in order to avoid forcing people into homelessness. So I decided to look at what exactly she meant, and of course what she means is to move us more towards a socialist state where the government regulates the housing market. And I thought, okay, well, let's look at the socialist countries and see how well they've done with equal distribution of the housing market.
All right. And how do these countries stack up when it comes to respecting private property rights?
Well, as you can imagine, I looked at the Freedom House and the Corruption Index and the Economic Freedom Indices and found that these countries are way down at the bottom end. I found that these countries are very corrupt. And lo and behold, I found that leaders of these countries like Kim Jong-il in North Korea has a 7-story pleasure palace equipped with a bar and karaoke machine, movie theater, and that his personal net worth is around $4 billion. That's billion with a B. Meanwhile, Cuba's Fidel Castro weighs in around only 900 million. Of course, he lives in a palace or two himself, whereas the people in these countries are not necessarily guaranteed a right to own a house. So I just have to shake my head at the outrageous contradiction between what these UN representatives claim and what the reality shows when it comes to really anything they set their sights upon, whether it's civilian disarmament or whether it's determining how to make people not homeless or homeless in the case of North Korea. It's a very interesting study and something.
Well, yeah, the rhetoric versus reality when it comes to the United Nations is sometimes very staggering. A case in point, we've been talking about what is going on in Kenya, where they have a disarmament campaign taking place, not through the United Nations, but through the auspices of the Kenyan government. And the justice minister there has basically told the government, look, if we catch anybody in illegal possession of a rifle, it should be the death penalty. We should just kill them. And over the years, the United Nations has taken part in disarmament programs in Kenya, under the guise of increasing stability and safety for Kenyans. But the reality is, what happens is the government goes into these pastoralist areas, the tribal areas in northwest Kenya. They confiscate a small number of rifles, sometimes at great cost to human life. They then leave. The disarmed tribalists are all of a sudden at the mercy of the cattle raiders from the neighboring tribes. The cattle raiders come in. They will kill the men. They will sometimes kill the women and children as well. They will certainly take the livestock. And this is seen, I guess, as a success by the United Nations because they got some guns, Howard, and that's what's important. Now, there are dead civilians. There are innocent victims. But they got 14 rifles, and that's what's important. We need to focus on on the real issue here, and that's 14 rifles are no longer in the hands of Kenyans.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point, and it turns out that Transparency International considers Kenya to be one of the most corrupt governments in the world, and also their economic ratings are very poor, and the people there are not free. So, that jibes with what you're saying. Those 14 rifles make for good PR at the United Nations, but the and this is what I found with this special rapporteur in housing, when she's actually confronted with the reality of some of these thuggish regimes, she throws her hands up in the air and says, well, these are sovereign countries, and they really have to resolve their own issues. The governments have to resolve their own issues within the country. And I find it's so interesting that she feels free to come into this country where she knows, because we're a free country, she can speak her mind as outrageous as she wants to be,
Mm-hmm.
and she will not be hauled off in the dark of the night by government agents. Whereas if she went to countries like Kenya or North Korea or Cuba and spoke out about injustices there, she would be gone in 24 hours. And she knows this, so she decides to come and throw her weight around here.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a quote. It may have been Edmund Burke, and I'm probably going to paraphrase this badly, but he was talking during the American Revolution, and Edmund Burke was a British philosopher, political philosopher, member of Parliament, and he said that something along the lines of a British style government is possibly the least equipped to handle talk of a revolution, or his point was that in a country that allows a broad expression of political thought, yes, you're going to find sometimes political thought that crosses the line of I guess to the Brits anyway, a good taste or common sense. Now, as it turns out, the Americans were, I think, right in this case, but we do have freedom of speech in this country, and that allows people to come in and make these outrageous statements that you're right, Howard, they would not be able to make in a less free society. And it's sort of a paradox that these folks will come to this country to bash this country and to promote the ideas of these despotic nations, where, quite frankly, they probably would last about 24 hours.
Yeah, and I think it's disturbing that they would come here to promote the very things that have come to fruition in other countries that have resulted in such mass destruction of liberty and lives. It concerns me that people like this are even given a foothold to speak sometimes, but I know that's covered under our First Amendment. I just hope that we can continue educating people through the media outlets like NRA News, and I think we are succeeding in that as I see the poll numbers drop in terms of how many people believe we should ban guns. But it does concern me greatly, and I had to speak out on this, and that's why I wrote this. It's a little off, a little tangential to gun rights, but nevertheless, we're in a war of many battlefields, not just, and the gun rights themselves is just one of the battlefields.
Nope, you're absolutely right. Howard, I appreciate you coming on the program tonight, sir, and I look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Well, thanks for having me on, Cam.
My pleasure. Howard Nemerov, the Austin Gun Rights Examiner, our unofficial investigative analyst here at NRAnews.com.